All right, today we're going to take a look at lesson number 3, dealing with animating text. Inside of here, we're going to actually go in and create and animate our text layers. We're going to stylize text using the character and paragraph panels. You'll find as we start working with them, the panels are identical to the rest of the Creative Cloud, so you're not going to see anything new, not understand what icons are for them. We're going to apply and customize text animation presets. I want to use presets back on lesson 2, but with that we're going to go and look at what happens when we bring those in, and we briefly looked at the keyframes related to those presets. We're actually going to go ahead and adjust some of those preset keyframe settings today. Preview animation presets in Adobe Bridge. We'll install fonts using Adobe fonts. Your machines, based upon the way that your licensing is set up, I don't know that they're going to allow you to use the Adobe fonts. So with that, anytime we get into a situation where we're going through and working with it, if you don't have that exact typeface that it's looking for, we can just choose something off of the system fonts and we'll just run with that. Animate text using keyframes. Edit and animate imported Adobe Photoshop text, and then use a text animator group to animate selected characters on an individual layer. So as we go through and we start to work with this, it's really going to expand on what we covered in lesson 2 related to animating and using the presets. When we go into preview things inside of Bridge, sometimes, as I said in the past, the preview doesn't work quite the way it should. Sometimes it will allow us to kick into After Effects, or kick into Bridge from After Effects, and we can see them in the sense of just see their names. Other times we get in there and they'll actually allow us to preview what's there. A lot of it just depends on how it's ultimately running, and I don't know the exact reason as to why. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So we're going to go in and work out of our lesson 3 folder. Inside of that assets folder, you're going to find the blue crab logo.psd file. It's going to be the Photoshop document we're going to use to bring in when we start talking about compositions and what sizes are we working with. There's a fishswim.mov, and then there's a location.psd, which is another Photoshop document as well. If you want to go through and look at the sample movie, you can play that lesson 03 AVI sample movie. I'm not going to play that. We're going to actually create it. And then we can look at the end to see if we've matched up with that. Some advantages sometimes we go through and we start looking at what an end result is, especially when you go through and start learning how to do different things. You may want to look at a video, play it, and then just try to recreate it. Don't think about the exact steps. Use whatever steps you have. There's a lot of different ways that we can get from point A to point B. The goal for us is to ultimately get there. So let's go ahead and start up After Effects if you haven't. And we're going to go ahead and come up here and just simply go ahead and click on New Project. So we get our nice new project in here. Some people will prefer you to go through and save it now. If you look at what the book ends up pulling up, the book will tell you to do a save as now. If you want to wait and import all of your stuff and do that later, that works as well. But we'll go and do File, Save As, Save As. And if you navigate to wherever it is that you have your file saved at, we're going to go into the Lesson 3 and then the Finished Project folder. And we want to go ahead and give this a name. So we'll give it the fancy name of Lesson 03 _ finished. Or if you wanted to make it Blue Crab Charters, or you can name it whatever you want to name it. Remember, as we go through, as soon as we name it, whatever we're working off of across the top, it will give us the full thing. Think of these are breadcrumbs, finding our way back to where it's saved at. So if you're not quite sure where you saved it, that'll allow you to see that. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to come over here inside of the composition panel. And before we've looked at clicking on new composition to create a new composition, we're going to click on new composition from footage. So what's going to happen here is we're going to go into our assets folder and we're going to select an actual movie file, and we're going to use that to set up our composition. So in this case, we're in lesson 3. If we go into our assets folder, inside of here is going to be this fishswim.mov. So once we have this set, we can go and say open. Now, two things should occur here. You're going to find, well, or we could say even 3 things or 4 things, depending on how you want to go in and work with it. So if we look over inside of a project panel, we're going to see that there's the footage we selected. And since we said new composition from footage, it automatically created us a new composition. Now, once it created that new composition, out inside of our composition window, we're going to see a fill frame. And then down inside of our timeline, you're then going to see the fishswim.mov that's inside of that composition called fishswim. Then you can go ahead and hit the space bar. It's going to put us on the preview for it. As it goes through and starts working, you're going to see the footage that we have. This footage is 13 seconds in length. You can see that in multiple spots. So as we go through and look at it, we can see in the timeline it's now 13 seconds. And if you look up inside of the project panel next to the preview, you're going to see that it's 1280 by 960. You'll see it's 13 seconds in length, and it's a 60 frames per second video. That's why we see the 59.94. So you think 29.97 times 2. So we're going to keep that same thing goes when we start looking at updating those frame rates. So now we should have that here. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and just hit save. What are we going to lose? We're just simply going to lose the video that we're going to bring right back in if we did go through and lose it. Most of the time when I start working, I wouldn't have done the initial save as. I would import my footage like this to get started, and then once I have something in there, then I would ultimately do a save. My workflow, your workflow can be different. You can stick to the way that they go through and use it. Now, nice thing as we start working inside of After Effects is there's a lot of flexibility as we go through and we start to work with text in here, just like working with anything else. The other thing it allows us to go through and work with is we can precisely place things. So as we start working today, we're going to look at going through and controlling properties and placing them in specific locations and starting to get just a better understanding as to what is available to us. If we go through and start looking at it, I don't know how many people have used Adobe fonts, but it allows us to go in. It used to be Typekit is what they used to refer to it as, and now everything says Adobe fonts. So as we start to use that, or if you have access to it, if you have your own CC account, you'll be able to log in. You'd be able to go and pull those up. I don't know how many of you have used Adobe fonts or Typekit or any of those before. Yeah, no, okay. So with it, we're going to look at if it'll allow us to have full access to it. So we go up here to the Find menu. You're going to move down a little ways. You'll see Add Fonts from Adobe. Now if you click on this, it's going to go in and open up what's here. Now as we go in to use these, you're going to see that you would need to be signed in. In the upper right hand corner, you'll see the sign in to go in and use what is there. If you come in here and start to look, we can put in sample text. So if you're really wondering what's your specific text going to look like, we can go ahead and we can put that in here. So see, as you do that, all of the previews in there are going to show the text that you are ultimately working with. Over here on the left, we have filters. So this allows us to go in. Do we want calligraphic? We want clean, Art Deco, rough, futuristic, marker. We can go ahead and we can select those. If we come down here to the classifications. So if we dig back into 178, sans serif, serif, slab serif, script, mono, and hand. So starting to think about what are we dealing with for type classifications. Properties, how many are in there? We also looked then at dealing with weights, widths, the X height, contrast, standard or caps only. We look at then how we're dealing with numerals, those figures there, what's going to happen with those. So these are all options that are available to us to go in here and start to work. So if you click on one, in this case I clicked on funky, you're going to see that it goes through and adjust each of those items. So you can start to break down what exactly is it that you are looking for. Now you can go through. If you don't want them, we can go up here and click on clear filters. They will go away. If you're looking for a specific font, foundry, or designer, we can go ahead and we can type up in here. So we look at Zap. We're going to see here ITC Zap International. So if I click on there, it's going to allow us to go in what fonts are available to us. In this case, we have Zap International ITC Standard Medium, and we have a Standard Demi. So those are available to us, and then we see other pairings. We start looking at what do they suggest go together. So if you find that as you start working with type, and it's an area that now we have access to thousands and thousands and thousands of them versus when you go back, 25 years ago, we didn't have access to these. So this does allow us to look at what is inside of here. So the one that they use on here is Kaluna Sands. So we go and pull that up. It shows us all of the different versions. There's light italics, regular. So these are all ones that are available for us to go in and use. Now, if we want to go ahead and use one, we need to go ahead and click on this Activate Font. You'll see it's going to go in here. It's going to ask me to sign back in. For the sake of today, because I don't think any of you would be able to sign in to work with it, we're just going to end up pulling something out that is, again, we're looking at it, something that's sans serif. We know that we're going to be utilizing a regular and a bold, so we're going to choose just something that will work for that inside of After Effects. But like I said, if you do have your own account, if I logged in, I'd be able to go in and access these the way mine's set up, but yours isn't that way. So let's go ahead and jump back over to After Effects. And we're going to go in and we're going to start working with type. Now we start thinking about type. And this is the same really in all the applications. It's just in design general. We look at point type and paragraph type. When we think about it from the standpoint of point type, if we go in and we click somewhere and start typing, it's just going to continue to give us one big long line of text until we hit return to create then something there. Now, as we're building them though, when we talk about point text in general usually just is one line of copy, or it's an individual word. So once you click, you type it out, and that's what you have. Some of them will allow you to go in once you type it out. If you hit return, it will create that return and allow you to continue doing text. Others, once you hit return, it's just going to commit that to it. We start looking at paragraph text. Paragraph text, in general, we typically are defining an area in which the text is going to be, and then we go through and we start adding our text inside of that. So again, think about it from point text, single word or a line of characters. Paragraph text allows us to go into single paragraph, multiple paragraphs as we go through to lay that out. So we're going to go ahead and enter some point text first, remembering that each line that we go through and we create is independent of the other one. So if you go up to the top of your screen, this is our type tool right here. So if we go ahead and click and hold down on that, you will see there's a couple different options available to us. We have horizontal type, we have vertical type. You'll find, are there times in which you're using vertical type? Yes. Vertical type is a lot harder to read. So just keep that in mind as you go through and begin to use it or using it on something, know that it's going to be a little bit more difficult to read. Can still be effective. So we're going to go ahead and choose our horizontal type tool. And once we have our horizontal type tool, we're just come out here inside of our composition and we're going to click somewhere. Now once you do that, you should see a line that's indicating the insertion point. You don't need to be concerned about exactly where that is. So once we have that out here, let's go ahead and start typing snorkel tours. Why did my S not show up? There it goes. Snorkel tours. Now we go through and we create this. This is all based on whatever the current settings were inside of your character panel over here. Just lost my text. Now, if you do hit return, you'll see you can start to type again. It's going to allow you to create what is inside of there. So you're not stuck with just a single line if that's what you want to go through and work with. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to have that set inside of there. Now, if we go through and I'm clicking down inside of my timeline, allowing me to go through and begin to adjust what we have in place. Now, with this set inside of here, we can't go back and move this around using that type tool. You do have to switch back over to your selection tool. The shortcut to get used to on that is V. That's a shortcut that you're going to be using in a bunch of other applications as well. So once we go through and grab that, then we can go ahead and we can grab a hold of our historical tours and we can go ahead and move this around and place this anywhere that we want to ultimately place it. But the first thing we want to do is we want to go and we want to start dealing with our character over here. So what typeface are we going to choose as we start to deal with the size of it? What is available to us to work with this? We start looking at colors, same thing. We can go through and we can change our color. As you work with the text, you do not have to have the type tool selected and highlight the text to start to make those changes. As you notice when I first grabbed this, started clicking on it, moving around the sizes, I can do that with that selection tool. So with that selected, let's go ahead and let's define what we have for our text to match up with what they used at the beginning if you look on the first page of the assignment, or shall I say lesson. So if we go in here, we want to go ahead and start formatting this. So we have our character panel over here on the right. If you're not seeing your character panel, we can go up here to Window, and we can choose Character, and it will show up. You see the shortcut is Command 6. If it's collapsed like this, so we're not seeing all the options, you can just simply click on that, and it will come out. Now, as we start to look at this, what are these controls? So we have here, we have the actual family. We have then the style. Over here, we have eyedropper. This actually allows us to go out there with whichever item here is in front. That is the active color, whether we're dealing with fill or stroke. If we grab the eyedropper, we can actually come out here anywhere on this and we can click on it and you'll see it goes in there and grabs a hold of that color. If I were to switch it over to the stroke and grab the eyedropper and come out here, you'll see that it changes the stroke color. So as we go through and we start looking at colors, choosing colors, we want to choose something that's already in the color palette because it's based upon something else that's in there. We can go ahead and we can grab that. When you're dealing with animating your logos and you want to choose a color, background color, maybe you want to play off of what's there, you can choose that. We can make an adjustment to that as well. So just think about it as you choose the colors of it. This allows us to control that. Here we have our black and white. You'll see when you hover over the black and white, automatically goes the eyedropper. This is just assuming that you want to go in. In this case, if I click on the white, it changes that stroke over to white. If I wanted to fill to be black, I can just go right over this. So we're setting black and white. It's available to us inside of there to choose one of those so we don't have to go pull up just for black and for white. We come down here, this is actually the size of it. You'll see if you hover over top of the blue text, you get the hand that comes up with the arrows. Scrub to the right gets larger, scrub to the left, it gets smaller. We can also go ahead and click on the drop down. These are all shortcuts to specific heights. We come over here, this is our leading. Think about it from a line spacing. Again, there's a quick drop down for it. We can also go over top of this and scrub that as well. Come over here for kerning. So with this, we're going to have to put the insertion point between two characters. This allows us to adjust the space just between those two characters. Text foot over is our tracking. So we can go ahead and we can adjust this. See if we scrub out, spreads out the text that we have on there. Next is our stroke. So how large is that stroke going around the outside? What exactly are you trying to create with it? So we go through, we can adjust that. Fill over stroke, or we have stroke over fill. That's your difference there. Right now, when we start looking at the way the stroke is set up, our stroke is set up to be half and half. So as we go through to do that, half of the stroke is actually going behind our text right now. So that's why we don't see it like this. When you put the stroke over top, then we see the entirety of what is there on the stroke. We can go ahead and we can adjust our vertical scale and the horizontal scale of our text. We can also go in here and do a baseline shift. And then lastly, we can come over here and we can go through and we can start looking at how we're working with selected characters. So with this, we're looking at the overall width of that object. Down below then, these are some shortcuts. So this allows us to go to faux bold. What happens with that is if we choose a typeface that doesn't have a bold setting, we can do a faux bold. In theory, essentially it's like creating a stroke on the text. Next to it, we have faux italic. So if it doesn't have italicized, we can go ahead and all it does is skew our text. All caps, small caps. We have superscript, moving it up, or subscript, dropping it down, depending on what it is that we're going to work with. So we can get into then looking at ligatures and Hindi digits as well. So these are all options that are available to us. You're free to use these. All of these, as we go through, we start to work with them, could ultimately be animated as well. So we have this set, and we want to go ahead and adjust what we have for our text for our snorkel tours. We can stick with Married Pro. It's fine with me. Married Pro. We can run it in a bold. So we have our sans serif typeface. So with this set, though, we're going to go ahead and adjust the size. We're going to take this down. We're going to match up with what they have for size. I don't know how Kaluna Sans and Married match up when we start looking at X height and set widths, but we'll just go ahead and choose it. We can adjust it. If we need to make it a little bit larger once we get towards the end, we can do that as well. And we're going to go ahead and come in here to our stroke, and we want no stroke. So the other thing we can do as we go through to select it is right next to this, we see this slash. The slash indicates none. So if we go ahead and we click on there, you'll see the red slash going through our text or our stroke box, indicating that that is now set to none. And we want to go ahead and make our text here. So our fill is going to be set to white. So you're going to see something that looks just like this. So now we have our text. If you want to, again, you can move this. You can position this. Instead, as we get working a little bit later, we can go in and adjust the size of this. Now, if we go and we choose our paragraph panel, this is one other way that we can go about using that. So directly below the character is our paragraph panel. Now, inside of here, this allows us to select how things are aligned. Now, as we go through and we look at it, you may say, well, we're not working with paragraph type. This is point type. But you'll see if you go ahead and you start clicking through the different options that are available to you for your text alignment, you're going to see that that moves. And that's because you'll see this little bullseye here, this target. A target's indicating what is it using as the position. So where is the positioning based on? It's going to be based on that point. So with that set there, if I go to center, you're going to see that that target now drops to across the baseline there. It's right in the center of it. We can use this to allow us to go in and adjust how we ultimately want to position things. So when we start to position it, that's what's going to happen with it. So let's go ahead and set that to center. And then we want to go ahead and adjust this text. Now, as we have our text, you may remember what we did with the other one. We went through and we tried to set it based upon the comp. So we went ahead and we had it scale the image up so it fit inside the comp. We're going to do the same thing with text because everything that's inside of here allows those same features available to work. So we have snorkel tours selected. If we come up here to our layer, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and want to adjust this. So we're adjusting it. We're going to transform it to fit inside of there. So in this case, layer, transform. And then we need to go ahead and we're going to set it to fit to comp width. So it's going to scale it up to go ahead and go all the way to the edges. So as soon as we do that, you're going to see that it should move all the way out like this. So it's touching the left side and also touching the right side. Now what we want to do is we want to ultimately move this up onto it so that it's going to be in the upper third of the screen. Now we could go through, we could just go ahead and grab a hold of this and move it. If you hold down shift as you move things, so you'll see that you can move them right, left, up, down, and then it should snap here. Maybe it's not going to. A lot of times it'll snap to, so you'll get a nice 45 degree as well. But you'll see we can go ahead, we can move this up and down. Now, could we eyeball this? Yes. Another thing we can also do is we have the capability of going in and actually seeing a grid. So if we go under view, we want to go ahead and come down here where it says show grid. Once you click on that show grid, you're going to see the grid come up. Now it is broken down into these smaller increments. So we think about these as quarters. That's what allows us to go through. So if you count the boxes, so we have 12 of them on here. 12 divided by 3 is 4. So with that, we know that we have 4 of these is going to be our upper third. So we want to go ahead and if we position this so that it sits right where that, between those, the 2 and 3, or however you want to number them out. We can go ahead and we can drop that in, something about like that. Once you're happy with that, for us to go in here, we can go ahead and we can turn that off. The other thing too is we have the ability to actually snap to guides and snap to grid. So when we go through, we didn't pull any guides out yet on this, but we do have that grid. We can go ahead and turn on snap to grid if you want to as well, and it's just going to bounce from spot to spot to spot. Once you have a position, you don't want to see the grid anymore, all we need to do is simply click on show grid. Once again, it's going to go in and disappear. So I'm going to go ahead and save. We move some stuff around. Right now we don't have anything real fancy. I mean, if we play it, all we do is we just have our snorkel tours sitting down there. Nothing's gone in, nothing's moved. But we are beginning to add additional elements to it. Now as we went through and we scaled this up, is there a way for us to see how large this is compared to its original? Yes, yes we can. If we go over here, we choose our snorkel tours down here inside of the timeline, and you go ahead and hit the shortcut for scale property, which is S. You're going to see it comes out and shows that based on this, we went up to 225.9%. Now, if you had been using the Kaluna Sands is approximately 250%. But with this in here, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and take this and we want to adjust this so that it slowly scales itself down. In this case, we're going to try to scale this down to right around 200%. We might go just a little bit smaller than 200%. So let's go ahead and adjust our timeline. So we're going to decide where do we want this to be at that 200% mark. So that's where we need to go ahead and adjust the timeline to. Because remember, once we go through and we change something, that's going to be the basis for it. So we're going to go ahead and take our current time indicator, and we're going to move this to the 3-second mark. So I'm going to come over here to my timer, and I'm going to set this to 300, or I'll hit 300. So it takes me to 3 seconds. So it sets this right here, currently at 3 seconds. And like I said, we have the scale property available to us. Now inside of here, we're going to go ahead and click on the stopwatch next to scale. So we're just going to come in and we're going to click that on. Turning that on does what? Sets a keyframe for us. So this is the first keyframe in here. This allows us to know that at this point, at the 3-second mark, this is going to be the size of this text. Now we can go ahead and we can leave our text like this. If you wanted to change the size right now, it will change it. And essentially it becomes a global setting to it. And it's going to go all the way across the timeline because this is the current thing that is set here. Now if I go ahead and jump out to the 5-second mark, this is the point in which I want this to scale itself down. Now they went off of 200%. As we go to start to work with these, there's this little link in there. If we see that those links are together, that means that when we change one, the other is going to change. So we're constraining the actual proportions of this. So if I go in here and I type in 200 and hit return, you'll notice that both values are going to change. At that point, we can come out here and see that our text has gone in and scaled down. You'll also notice inside of the timeline at that 5-second mark, you're going to see another keyframe has been created for you. So we want to preview the animation. Anytime I go through and build one, I like to just use my scrubby preview. So I'll grab a hold of this and just simply move between the two to see how it goes through and scales down. And if you're happy with the size, that's fine. You will notice across the top, that little green bar, it's going to be broken up. That's just based upon what frames have been rendered as you were scrubbing back and forth. If I went back to the beginning or the 3-second mark, or roughly 3-second mark, and play it, you're going to see it's going to go through and it rendered all those out as it played it. So now we have this set to it. Now if you wanted to, we could also go in and we could start to adjust the work zone. As you begin to work with the work zone, if you go through, in this case, I'm going to move out to the 5-second 10-frame mark, and you'll see this bar going across here, which is indicating how much area is currently available to view. If you simply hit N, you will now notice that that bar shortens up and comes to here. That's because this is the work area. So as we go through to play it, and we talked about our preview, what exactly are we previewing? And here we have work area extended by current time. If we have this selected just to work area, and we go through and we play it, you're going to see it's only going to play the areas in the work area. So that's from the 0 mark to that 510 mark. So if for some reason you go in there and you keep hitting the space bar to preview something and it's not previewing what you want to see, go in there and check that preview to make sure that you're actually previewing everything and that you're not just stuck on a specific area that's been selected. As you go through and begin to work with that, the other thing you may want to do if you're looking at a work area is this ability to loop. Right now my loop's turned off. If you turn loop on, it'll keep playing the area. So on the work area, if you're trying to look at an animation over and over again, you don't want to have to keep hitting the space bar. Just make sure you turn that loop on. And then once you play it the first time, it will continue to loop. So in this case, if I come over here and play it, you're going to see it's going to go down. It's going to hit that 510 mark. It's going to jump back to the beginning and keep playing. You'll see that you'll use this a little bit more as we get into the point when you're looking at certain interactions. You want to make sure timing is right. You'll go and you'll set that and you'll watch that. And you'll have that loop going and then start making your adjustments from there. So it allows us to go in and see what is happening with it. Now, at this point, if we start looking at our keyframes, what's happening is this is going from nothing to full speed in one frame. When I start talking about keyframes, the easiest way to, for me at least, to explain it or to understand it or visualize it is to kind of think about each keyframe as like a train station. When you climb on a train, has everybody in here been on a train before? Okay, so when you climb on the train doesn't go from 0 to full speed like that, right? And so it takes it speeds up and then hits full speed, and then when it comes into station, it slows down. The other reason why I talk about it like a train station is when we go and we start looking at these keyframes. So if we come in here and we select this first keyframe, if we go ahead and we right-click on this, it's going to allow us to go in and we want to change what's happening with keyframes. So what's happening as they start to move through there? All these things are controllable. So are we going in? Are we dealing with linear? I mean, it's just going to go at the angle, or is there a curve to it? We can control what's going to happen as we work with these individual keyframes. But the other thing that we're also able to do inside of here is to come in here to our keyframe assistant. Now with this allows us to decide what's happening with these keyframes. So in here we have the ease. So easy ease in, out, and easy ease. So we start looking at the easy ease. It's kind of really both sides. It's easing in and easing out. But when we look at our keyframes, typically when we have 1 to 2, or 1 moving towards 2, we're dealing with one's going to be in and one's going to be out. The challenge here is we, in our minds, usually want to go through and think, oh, we're easing into the transition, we're easing out of the transition, but that's not the case. Think about it at the standpoint, as I said, each one of those is a train station. When you leave a train station, you are going out. So you want to ease out of the station, and when it's coming to a stop, you're going to ease in to the station. So on this first one, we're going to go ahead and use our easy ease out. And then we're going to come over to the second one, and we're going to go ahead and use that keyframe assistant, and we're going to go ahead and use easy ease in. So now what's happening is as it goes out of the station, it picks up, and then as it's coming into the station, it's going to slow itself back down. When you look at the actions, there's certain things that tend to show up a bit more, depending on what the action is. If we go through and we play it right now, most of you probably aren't going to notice a whole lot of difference in it, but as it moves through those first few frames, it slowly goes, and then it hits a speed, and then it slowly ramps itself back down. So it allows us to go through and work with it. If you're happy with that, we can go ahead and we can come back over. Let's go ahead and we'll toggle that scale back up. If you wanted to, you could also, as it plays, you can watch these values. So if I zoom in here and we play it, you're going to see this is not going to live update. If we stop in the middle, though, you'll see there 215.6. So we can see the changes as to where they're occurring, and you can make it do a lot more stuff with that. At any point in there, we can go and add in those individual areas. We start going between keyframe to keyframe. Other applications still make you do it. That's tweening. Just letting you know that it's going through and making those individual changes. So right now that this is here, it's not that exciting. So we're going to go and we're going to animate this title a little bit more to make it more interesting, utilizing some presets. So we're going to go ahead and go back to the beginning of our timeline. We can either go to the time code and type in a 0. We can hit the home key, or we can go ahead and drag the playhead all the way back to the beginning. Now with it back here, we're going to go ahead and make sure we have our Snorkel Tours text selected inside of our timeline. Now with it selected, last time we went through and we went in and we browsed in Bridge. So we're going to do the same thing. Let's go ahead and go into our animation. We're going to go browse presets. Now it should open up Bridge. And once it opens up Bridge, we should be able to see inside of our folder. We were in here once before. Typically it's going to have the old or the last one in there. So you'll see it automatically is going to pull up. So here we see our After Effects. There's the presets. These are all options available, backgrounds, transitions. So you can scroll through to see what is available in here. We're going to go to the one called text. And we can, across the bottom here, we can adjust then how large the folders are in our preview. So inside of here, there's one called Organic. Let's go ahead and go into Organic, and you'll see here we have this Autumn FX. So if we look over there on the right, you should see a preview of it. That preview will go through and run. Now there are some machines, I will tell you, that are not going to render these out, allow you to see exactly what they look like. We've had this issue in the past. To where they'll show up, sometimes they'll run, sometimes they won't run. It's good that this is currently running, so you'll see autumn coming down. It's kind of like a leaf floating down. You can select some of the other ones. If we click on flying formation, you can watch and see what's happening with them as the text comes in, moves around. There's fish bait. So it's sitting there, it's got a little bit of a wiggle to it. And ultimately, we're going to come down to the one called Ripple. Now, we came in here and we had that snorkel text selected. This is where it's important to make sure you're on the right layer when you get started with it. Because once we come into here, if we come over top of the preset, you should be able to double click on the preset. And it should carry across there. There it goes. So when you double click on that preset, that preview up there, it should go ahead and load that into there. If for some reason it doesn't, you can also go in and right click on it and choose Place in Adobe After Effects, and it will place it on the layer that you currently had selected. So if you had the wrong layer selected, it's going to go in there and adjust that one. Now it came over and it's in here. You'll notice your text is gone. Your text is gone because the way that that preset is set, it has to come in. It's not there yet. If you hit the space bar to preview it, you'll see your Snorkel Tours text come in there. So it comes in there, and then you're going to hit the other one where it's going to go ahead and scale itself down. So you can preview that, see exactly what is happening with what is there. Well, with our text down here selected, let's go ahead and expand out its properties. So if you go ahead and hit the U key, that's your Uber key. That's going to allow us to snap out and show us what actually has been animated inside of here. So we see our selector offset. The first one, we have our selector offset. We've got a second one. Then we also come down there and we see our scale. If you hit U twice, it's going to bring out all of your settings. So depending on what's here, go ahead and just bring this up so we can see a little bit more. Depending on what all's set, so in here we see our animators. And it appears that when I was doing this, I must have put a second animator ripple skew on it. Unless this one has two. Looks like there's just the one. Okay. I bet what it's probably done is probably broken up to 2 words. And that's probably what it's done on here. So we'll start looking at our animator, our ripple skew here. So if we toggle those both open, we're going to see there's an offset. And if I look, we'll see what we get here. So we're going to go ahead and look at our Ripple 1 skew. And inside of here we see we have our selector offset. So if we toggle that down, we're going to see our start and our end. It's going to indicate to us what areas or how is it going through and working its way out to do the skew. As we start to move down, these are all options that are available to us. We have our advanced, so we toggle that open. We can see how is it working, percentage. It's a percentage of, should be based on the percentage of the words or characters that are going across the individual items. What mode is it ultimately using? Ease high, ease low. And the other thing down here is we have this randomized order. And depending on how much screen area you have available to you, may or may not be able to see the whole word. So if we drag this across, you can see randomized order. And we currently have off. If you click on that, you'll see it goes to on. If you click again, it goes back to off. So we can toggle those on and off as we go through to select it. So we're going to choose on. So we're going to click on that so we get our randomized order turned to on. And then if we go ahead and look what's happening with that. Well, if we come in here and we start to pull this across, now you're going to see, instead of it coming up word-wise, character by character, now it's just a random selection as to what letters are actually coming in first, second, third, and so on. So you can go ahead and you can just drag across to view what is there. Now, if you did toggle all those things out, once we have it selected, once again, we can hit U, getting the U known as your Uber key. We'll allow you to go ahead and toggle those all back closed. You're going to want to get in the habit of closing those properties up after you're done working with a layer so you don't end up accidentally clicking on them and making changes to stuff, or when you apply similar effects to 2 different layers and all of a sudden you make an adjustment to it and you find yourself going back in to fix that. So we have those adjusted. If we go ahead, and in this case we had set that work area, when you want to go through and get rid of your work area, if you just go ahead and hit end, remember I'll go to the end of the item that's there, or the end of your timeline. We can do that, and we can hit N once again then. So end to get to the end of it, and then N to move our work area or assign the end of our work area to that spot. So it's going to go all the way to the end of our timeline. With that, I'm going to go ahead and save that. If we go back to home, so we now have this. If you go ahead and hit spacebar, you can watch it begin to play itself out. Now, as we start working, can we work with text inside of After Effects? Certainly we can. But what you're going to find when we start looking at for control purposes is that you're probably going to be doing a lot more work in other applications, especially when you start talking about aligning stuff or animating individual content. You'll be creating that stuff and then bring it into After Effects to add the effects to everything and to make adjustments to them. So let's go back to our project panel. The upper left, you may have seen the effects controls. As long as you can see where the tab is for project, go ahead and click on that. If you can't see it, remember on your arrows over here to the right, or as they're starting to call them now, chevrons to the right. If you go ahead and click on those, you will then see project. And if you click on project, it'll bring that panel here so we can see it. We want to go ahead and we're going to import a file. Now, could we have done it another way? Yeah, we could have gone to file import and we could have brought the file in that way. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to go ahead and just double click down here below on the project. We're going to go in and bring in this case, we have this location.psd file. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to select that and we're going to choose import as composition retain layer sizes. So it's looking at what was the sizing and everything that we created inside of Photoshop. So when we build stuff in there that we know is coming into After Effects, keep in mind the size. What's the overall size that you're going to have this? If you're building it that way, we can retain the layer sizes. It's going to keep that in here as we bring it over. So we have that set. We're going to click on Open. As this comes up, make sure we have editable layer styles turned on. This is going to allow us to edit that text. We say OK. It brings it in as a Photoshop file and creates us a new composition because we said composition, retain layer sizes. So when you toggle Open, you will see there's the Photoshop document. There's our location. My guess is they named it location, and there's a layer called location. And that's our .psd. So that's what it's reading off of. So we now have that location that is brought in there. What we want to do is we want to go ahead and get that into our composition. So the easiest way to do that is to go ahead and we're going to grab a hold of the composition in our project panel. We're going to bring it down until we see that line, blue line going across above Snorkel Tours. We're going to go ahead and drop that in place. Once you do that, you're going to see out here on your in your composition window is going to be that location text that showed up. Now at this point, we have our location text in here. If we go ahead and we double click on that, we'll see that we have our own timeline, our own composition that's been created by that. Now right now there isn't anything in there other than you see a black box. And we see that we have text if we zoom in a little bit. Mine refreshing isn't refreshing it exactly right when it zoomed out. Yours may have. So we zoom in, we can see we have our location text. Right now though, this is just a layer. Right now this is essentially being treated like footage because we can't do anything with this text yet. So we have our text in here. We need to go ahead and make this text so that we can go ahead and adjust it. So with that, with our layer selected, we're going to come up here. We're making a layer change. So we want to come in here to Layer. And then we want to go ahead and create something. What is it we want to create? Editable text. So we'll create, convert to editable text. And then once you do that, you're going to notice that the little target drops just a little bit. And this now allows us to go in here and edit our text. To give myself a little bit more space because of what we're going to be using on the right, I'm going to go ahead and slide this back down. So if we come over to our character, once we click on our character, you're going to see that it's showing up that this is impact, regular, and then you should notice the colors match up with what you have out there. If we come out here onto our text, if we double click onto the text, this is with the actual selection tool, which is shortcut V, you're going to see that it goes through and highlights it. You're going to also notice across the top that your type now is selected. So as in the type tools, we horizontal type tools selected. We can go ahead and we can just type in our change here. So again, we can type in what is here. Now at this point, when we go through and we start to work with it, you may find that everything in this case is not capitalized. If you look at the results following along with the lesson, it's going to be all caps. There are ways we can work with this. Now the fast way for me, if I typed it like this, I'm like, wait, I want it all caps. For you at least, maybe go back and retype it. For me, I'm going to come over here to my type panel, and I know that I have all caps here. If you go ahead and click on all caps, it's going to go ahead and change it anyways. So this just goes in and does a case change. So now we'll see that it's all caps. You will notice that as we make that change, this isn't something that doesn't change. In the essence, it doesn't go into the script of it and make it all uppercase. All it does is it tells it to, because we see we have a little checkbox over there. If I uncheck that, it's going to go back to the same way that I typed it. So if you're wondering what's it look like all caps, you could do that. You're not going to have to retype the text and come back away from it. So that will allow us to go in and make it all caps for us. And we go in and choose our text. We have our text set, and we want to go ahead and come over here to the color for our stroke. In this case, we want to go ahead and make the stroke of this a teal color. If you go ahead and click on the text, well, stroke, it's going to come up and say text color, but this is going to be our stroke. We have different ways to enter this. Same box you see in the other applications. So we can go through here and we can slide this up and down. So we can look at our hue. We can start dealing with how saturated is it. And we can decide how brilliant it is as well. What they ended up working off of here is something in RGB level. We can key in those RGB levels. So if we go through and start working with different applications, most of the applications do very well on syncing color. If you find that certain ones don't, then you can always pull from one app. You can get the RGB levels and you can have those written down and key those into here. So we're going to go with the red of 70, a green of 92, and a blue of 101. And we'll go ahead and we'll just say OK. And then you can see out here the stroke is on there. We're going to leave the rest of the stuff set to where it was on default. So this is just a 1-point stroke. Now that we have this set, I'm just going to click away from it and go ahead and hit Command S to save it. So now we have our text on here. If we jump back over and we look at our initial one, you should see that your text has gone through and updated. So now we actually have our real location inside of there. So we want these to go ahead and move in to this frame underneath of what we have for our snorkel tours. So we have that location selected. Let's go ahead and go to the 5-second mark. So we're going to jump out there. If you remember what happens at 5 seconds, that's when this goes through and scales itself all the way down. So you should have that into there. Now as we start to work with items, sometimes you will find that it doesn't go the entire length of our timeline. And that's because as we start to look at that, this is the location in which this matches up to. That's based on the length of the composition that we had before. So we start thinking about location. How long is our location composition? If we look over here, we're going to see that this is 3 seconds in length. If we come out here and we start looking at our fish swim, we'll see that this is 13 seconds. So as we start to look at what's happening with our composition and why something is there. If this needs to go through for 13 seconds, we would need to adjust this composition. So if I went in here, composition settings, this is where we're going to see that 3 seconds. If we need this to be 13 seconds, then we would want to go ahead and adjust that. So I take that to 1300. Now if I go back in here, we should have our location expanded out. Let me see something here. So my quick fix was to simply go in here and adjust that to be set, but it's still not showing up the way that I want it to. Are yours showing up right? This is where we get to go in and we have some fun with it. So on the location setup, once we created that, this is where I should have gone in and fixed this the first time, but once we went in and we extended this to 13 seconds, what's going to happen with it is we created the composition, but this was already brought in at only 3 seconds. If you go over the end of it, since we did no animations to this and it is just text, so it's a static layer, on the right, you're going to see that we get the ability with the arrows. Just go ahead and click on that and just drag that all the way out to the right. So it'll go our 13 seconds. I didn't have to delete it from the other fish swim. So when we see inside of here, now that I extended that out, you're going to see that now it should stay on there the whole time. So there are times that you get to have this fun troubleshooting. There's different ways you could probably create this and work with this. you'll find though that you are going to default back to the way that you typically go through and work with it, or whatever thing has worked for you. Does everybody have that going the full length now? Okay. So now we have that the full length. Again, if we go ahead and we play it, we'll be able to see that it's on there. It's going to go in there. We see the snorkel tours. But the key when we get to that 5:10 mark, what's right, or that 5 second mark, I should say. What happens at 5 seconds? What do we see? If I go down here to snorkel tours and I hit the U key, what's occurring at that 5 second mark? It's the last keyframe, and that's where it scales itself to that 200%. So that's when that 200% is done scaling. So that motion's gone and taken place. So now we're going to come in here and look at what do we want to do with this text. We're going to go ahead and animate then our location text into here. So what do we want this to do? So let's go ahead and select our location layer inside of our timeline. And we want to go ahead and look inside of our effects. So we want to go ahead and deal with what effects are available to us. So we can jump back over into Bridge. Now we can come in here if we want to. We can say Browse Presets. Now inside of here there's text. So we want to go into our text folder. And inside of our text folder we want to go in and start to look at how are we going to animate these. So are we animating something coming in, or do we want to animate something going out? We're going to go into our Animate In. Now when we get into our Animate In, these are all ways in which our stuff can actually show up inside of here. We're going to come over here to this Raining Characters In. You'll see how they drop themselves down. They rain into location. So once we have that set, and we like that, we look at it, we decide that's what we want. Let's go ahead and we'll double click on the preview again. If it doesn't work, then we can go ahead and right click on it, and let's come down here and try Place in Adobe After Effects 2021. And let's see. And then if it still doesn't work, and this is why I said the browsing in there sometimes works like it's supposed to, and then sometimes it doesn't come in. I think it's because I was on the composition, so that's probably my fault. Let's try this once again. Let's go ahead and take this, and I'm going to pull it up. Inside. Did you guys get yours to work? It worked? Text, Animate In, Raining Characters. All right, so what I'm going to do with mine is we can also find these inside here with our effects and presets. Raining Characters In. There we go. So if you know what exactly you're using, I don't go into the browse. I go into browse if I'm looking at the effects so I get an idea of what it's going to create. Because what's happening right here is the common thing that I've ran into browsing them. Is it'll work sometimes, other times it doesn't work. Maybe it's just user error. Because again, I don't spend a lot of time going over into that. So what's going to happen with that is once we bring that in, if you come down here in our timeline and we have our location selected and we hit the U, we're going to see this offset that's down here. If we go ahead and we hit U one more time, what we should see here is we see our text, we see our range selector, we should scroll down and we should see our keyframes coming in here. Right there they are. Range selector is the offset. So we go through and we start playing at what's happening to our text. And where is it going? If we look inside here, let's see. Now that I added those, let's see if it's gonna. Text is dropping down, but there it looks right. Keyframes are in the right spots, but okay, that looks right. But when it comes over here, is your text looking right on yours? Yeah, they shouldn't turn white like that. I mean, this one here shows up a little bit lighter. Nothing else is keyframe, so in here it looks right. Well, we'll keep running with this and we'll see if I can identify why it's coming in, why it looks different in here. But inside of there, you should be able to look at it. Like I said, if you toggle open your Uber key, it should allow you to start to see what's happening with the offset. So you'll see there as it drops down, based upon where it's at. Just trying to see if there's any other settings in here that might be creating that. I'm not seeing anything. So that's going to allow that to come in here and drop down with that. Now what we can do if we want to speed up this, instead of having it take as long as it is, we can always go ahead and choose this last keyframe, and we can simply grab a hold of keyframes and we can slide them over. So in this case, I can bring this over here and I can drop it right here on the 6-second mark. So now that transition happens much quicker. See how fast everything comes in. So once again, if we jump back over here, so this almost looks like there's multiple things going on here. I'm gonna do that. That's the other thing as you're working as well, when you're dealing with compositions, if you have a composition nested inside of another composition, if it's playing right over here on the composition, which right now we can see over here, it looks right. The other thing you can always try is we can go in and we can get rid of it, pull it out of the one, come back into our setting. We can always try to drop it back in here and see if that allows it to work. And once we do that, you can see now what happens. It's working. So as you start to work with stuff, start to kind of put things into your mind, even as creative problem solving. How can we go through and work with it? Because now you can see that the text is showing up like it's supposed to. And that most likely was impacted by the fact that as we went in and we changed the way that composition was structured, that it created an effect or an issue as we went in and brought it in to here. So once we have this set, we're going to go ahead and we're going to position this in a different location. Now, what nice thing about it is we can just go ahead and grab a hold of this and slide this up. We don't have to worry about anything else with it. We're going to position this up here so it lines up with the end of our snorkel tours. So it's up here just below it. And if you play that, you can see how that comes in, and then you're going to see this should rain down here to that location. There it comes. So we see that coming into place. Now that we have that straightened out and squared away, let's go ahead and save that. So now if you're at the 651 mark, you should see something that looks like this. If you're at a different timeline, you can scrub over just to make sure that everything comes in and is in the place that you want it to be at. So if we go down here on the timeline, click away. We now see our fish swimming, snorkel tours, and our location. Everybody up to this spot? All right, so now we're going to add in our company name. We're going to go in and work with an animation tracking preset. Now, when we talk about tracking, we're talking about the expanding the text, so the space between a line of characters. So let's go ahead and grab our horizontal type tool. Once we grab that horizontal type tool, we're just going to come out here into our composition, and let's just go ahead and click somewhere, and we're going to type in Blue Crab Charters. This is all caps. So when we have this selected, we want to go ahead and make some adjustments to it inside of our character panel. So we're going to come over to our character panel. We can go ahead, if we highlight inside here, we can begin to type. It's going to go through and filter everything for us. We can use the up and down arrows to navigate then inside of the names that are here. This is a manner of the way I'm working. You can do it a different way. Once we go through and select it, we can go ahead and we can hit return. So we see we have Times New Roman. And even though I selected bold, there it jumped over. So we want to go ahead and make sure we have bold selected. So Times New Roman, I went Times New Roman bold. It should have populated it bold. I think it has to do with the accessibility feature on here. Once I pulled this up, once I clicked on it, it jumped over to bold for that. Now we come in to start to work with this. We want to go ahead and change our fill color. We're going to choose white. So remember, we can use that shortcut that's there. So fill color's in front. Just go ahead and click on the little white swatch. And we want to make sure we come over here to our stroke, and we go ahead and we click on that and select none. Now when we zoom back out, we should see it's over here. If for some reason you had something else selected and you went and changed the character settings, that's going to then be applied to whatever it was that you had selected. The last thing in here that we didn't adjust then is going to be our size. This is going to be 48 point, so we can hit select that, type in 48, and hit return. For our paragraph panel on this, we're going to go ahead and set this up to center if it isn't already. And we want to go ahead and position this down towards our lower third, aligning the left side of it over with Snorkel Tours. Now, if you wanted to, once again, we could go ahead and we could view our grid. So we can go ahead and grab this. We can say Show Grid. And then you can look at where the S is for Snorkel Tours, and you can go ahead and you can adjust it so that your Blue Crab Charger is set up there. Plus, we can also start talking about that third. I like my arrow keys. I'm a nudger, so I like to use my arrow keys to push things around. Some people like to do it differently. Again, you're going to find the ways that you like to work, and that's perfectly fine with it. Once you have that place, we can go ahead and toggle that grid back off. If you want to use the shortcut keys, if you hold down Command and you start to deal with your tick marks, so your apostrophe is really where it's at. You can click that on and off. That's a quick way to get those on and get those off. So we're going to move those over and adjust that into its location. Now I have these positioned, so I'm going to go ahead and save it because that's, again, another way that I work. Once I make a change to something's positioned where I want it. The other thing, we're going to jump now out to the 7:10 mark. So 7 seconds, 10 frames. When we're out to here, we want to go ahead and make sure that we have our Blue Crab Charters selected. Now, with this selected, we haven't done anything to change it. Some people get worried when they go in there and they bring something in, they type something out, they move it, that it's going to be animated. It's only animated if we have it selected. We toggle it open to the property that we want to go ahead and adjust, and we turn that stopwatch on. That's it. So So right now we move that. There are no issues with it. So we're going to jump to 710 because now we're going to start looking at how we want to go about animating what it is that we are working with. So with that selected, we want to go ahead and get into our effects and presets. So we're going to use our effects and presets panel on the right-hand side. If you typed in for the raining characters, then go ahead and click the little X to remove that. And then inside of our search, we're going to go ahead and start typing increase tracking. And once we type in INCR, the only thing left for us is this increase tracking. Now, we do need to make sure that layers that's selected is our Blue Crab Charters text. Otherwise, it's going to apply this to whatever other layer you currently have selected. So if you were still in location for some reason, it would apply it to that. We don't want it on that. We want it on Blue Crab Charters. So we're going to go ahead and come in there, and we're going to double click on our increase tracking so that it gets applied to what we have out there. So it's now been applied to our Blue Crab Charters. With this selected, if we go ahead and hit U, whoops, make sure I select it first, hit U, we'll see that the tracking amount shows up because that's the change we were making. If you look out here inside of our timeline, you're going to see that we have our 2 keyframes. And if you go ahead and drag between the 2, you're going to see what it goes through and does. So in this case, it's going to go from a tracking of 0, and it's set up to go out to a tracking of 40. So if we jump back to our 710 mark, we can go ahead and we can adjust that. The other thing we can look at over here inside of our timeline, we haven't talked about these. So we have go to previous keyframe. We have go to next keyframe. We also then see add or remove keyframe at current playhead. This thing does multiple things. So if we look at this, if this is blue, so when I hit this, the arrow to go to the previous keyframe, when that's blue, that is telling me that we're on an active keyframe. So if I click on this now, it's going to remove a keyframe. If we're not on this, if you move the playhead off just a little bit, so in this case, if I'm just going to come up here since I can see it. If I take this to 711, if I click now, it's going to set a keyframe. But what's nice about it is since we know that we're tweening on that 710 mark out to, I didn't see where it ended at for the second keyframe, but we're tweening on there, it automatically, that tracking value changes across there. So if I click to add a keyframe now, it'll be the tracking value at the exact same location that it's in now with the exact same value it has now. So in theory, yes, I can go frame by frame and click on this and put a keyframe all the way across there, and it'll look no different because it's going to automatically pull the value it's currently on. And then, like I said, this allows us to jump over to the other or last one. So this allows us to navigate between the keyframes. So if I jump back at the beginning and decide that I want to do something else with this, so I'm going to jump all the way back to that 710 mark. So I'm on the first keyframe. And inside of here, we have that tracking amount. It's currently at 0. I'm going to go ahead and make this tracking amount at this point to be -5. So what's going to happen is it's going to squish those characters together. It's reducing the space between each of the characters, squishing them together so it's going to start out a much tighter set of text. And then we're going to jump to that second keyframe. So I'm just going to use that arrow that says go to the next keyframe. So it's going to jump out there, and this is where it's all the way out at this point. And now I'm just going to go ahead and set this at 0. So I want this to be able to be legible and on screen when we get to this point. So in this case, we're going to go to that second keyframe, which is at the 810 mark, and we're going to go ahead and set that to 0. So now we can see that the text is simply going to go from narrow to the setting that I want to have it on. Now, what's our problem that we have with this? Has anyone identified a problem so far? It's what? It looks ugly? Why does it look ugly? Oh, no, so when we look at the text, what's the issue with our Blue Crab Charters right now? It's on screen the whole time. Bingo. So we want to go ahead and adjust this so it's not on the screen because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if we look at this. Blue Crab Charters, it's just going to sit there while the Historical Tours comes on, while the location shows up. And then all of a sudden, for some odd reason, it's going to do its little dance down there. So we want to go ahead and adjust this. So let's go ahead and jump back to that first keyframe. And on this first keyframe, we're going to go ahead and select our Blue Crab Charters text layer. And we're going to go ahead and hit T, which is our shortcut for opacity. Again, if you think about it from the standpoint of transparency, that's where the T comes in. So with this set, we want to go ahead now and change the opacity at this point to 0. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to click on the stopwatch. Why don't we want to click on the stopwatch and then maybe change it to 0? What are some issues we can run into? So at the beginning, you're going to end up with 100. It could drop to 0, just depending on what settings you've done, things like that. So as you go through, whatever the main setting is you want it to have, that's usually when you're going to want to set that first keyframe. Just kind of get into that habit. Now, once we have that set there, we want to go ahead and we don't want to make this take the whole transition time to get to full opacity. We want it just to be the first small portion of it. So we're going to jump out just 10 frames. That 720 mark. So really what we're looking at is we're looking at 1/3 of a second is what it's going to take. We want this to go from 0 opacity to full opacity. So now we see that second keyframe. If you go through and you have that set, then you go through and you type in the value for your second one, and you're not seeing that change or it's not transitioning, make sure you've inserted a keyframe. It's not uncommon. It's still even an error that those of us that have been using this for a while will make. We'll make a change to something like, well, I didn't stopwatch it, so I don't have a keyframe in there. So now we have that in there. So now if we simply go ahead and we just drag through, you can see how it comes up and then it expands out. It's almost like a constant motion where it goes from coming in transparency and then all of a sudden starts to expand itself out. So we can drag through there. Now as we go through and begin to work with them, we have these opacity keyframes. Now we can go through and we're going to select them and we're going to adjust what's going to happen with the keyframe. So we're going to come into the end one. Not worried about the first one. We're going to come into this end one. Let's go ahead and select that. Let's go into our keyframe assistant. And do we want to ease in or ease out? Ease in, because it's the second one. We're easing into the station as we're coming to set down. So let's go ahead and get that set. We'll save that. And then let's go ahead and just hit our UU. And then I'll go ahead and collapse all those properties up so they are gone. If you want, you could preview all of this to see exactly what's happening with it. So at this point, we're starting to get something that's looking interesting. Hopefully everything's working out for you. So let's go in now. Now we've worked with stuff. We're dealing with text on screen. Now we're going to go in and we're going to bring a logo in. We're going to work with it a little bit to allow us to make some things change, some stuff disappear. And to do so, we have the Blue Crab Charters logo, or the Blue Crab logo. That's what it is. That PSD file. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to import that. So let's go ahead and go back over here into our project panel. Let's go ahead and double click so it says to import. You should find this Blue Crab logo.psd file. We're going to go ahead and select that. We want to bring this in as a composition, retain layer sizes. So it's gone through, it's set, the layers, we want them to stay the way that they are. We're going to click on open. As this comes up, we're going to make sure we have our edible layer styles selected. So text in there and also the style themselves can be adjusted. We'll say OK. You should get another composition that shows up. You should see another folder that shows up as well that has the Photoshop in there. It is a single layer. It appears inside of this. We want to go ahead and bring this in. So we're going to grab this composition, drag it down, place it on top. So now we have our logo on here. We can move this around. It moves as one object since it is its own composition. We can go in and look at that composition as well to see the size of it and everything. So this allows us to go in and look at that Blue Crab logo in here. So if we look at this setup, we're using the compositions. We're going to go ahead and select that Blue Crab logo in here, and let's go ahead and hit P. P allows us to see our position property. Now, once we get in here, what happens if we want to see other things? A lot of times you're like, well, I want to change position, I want to change scale, maybe I want to change opacity all at the same time, or as you start working with that. We can add anything to these. So right now I hit P, it opened up. If you hold down Shift and you hit S, you notice it adds scale. If I were to still hold down Shift and hit T, notice opacity pops up as well. If I have Shift still held down or hold it back down, hit T, it'll only close that individual item. This allows you to open up those specific ones that you're going to use, that you're going to make changes to, but you don't want to have to go in and toggle over the disclosure arrows and then see all of the different things that are available to you. So with that, go ahead and set up so you have position and scale both available inside of here to edit. And then we're going to jump to the 10-second mark. So we jump out to 10 seconds. We're going to go in and adjust our positioning. Now we start to look at where it's at. Remember, positioning is based off of that bullseye. Now, since we brought this in, you'll see that it's right there in the center. So you know that that's the area you're going to set. So we sit here and we start to see position. Could we drag this? Yes, we can do it this way. This is just going to be our X. We can also grab a hold of this and just adjust our Y. We can also come up in here and we can move this around, and you'll see that that position changes over there based upon where that center point is and where we're ultimately dragging this to. So the position value that we're ultimately going to start with is a negative 810. Well, where's negative 810 put us? Way off of here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set that up at a negative 810. I did pretty well. I had a negative 815 without even looking. Negative 810 and a 122. So that's our X and our Y positioning. And we're going to go ahead and set this scale down to 25%. And we're going to set then we're going to go ahead and create keyframes. Now you don't have to click, then click. You actually can click and drag. So that'll allow you to go in there. So when you start working with multiple properties or you set a bunch of stuff up, you're going to make those changes, you can just drag down. If you had 20 different things set up there, you can just drag down and it will go through and set them. So we have position set. So it goes through and creates keyframes. They're at the 10-second mark based upon where we currently have it located. Now if you go through and you zoom out, and you can just do that with the scroll wheel inside of your composition. You can also go over here and you can look at your view as well. So we can view out even farther or in more. But what's going to show you is when you click on layers, you're going to be able to see these bounding boxes show up. So if you're ever wondering where something's at, is it not on there? Did it get moved somewhere? That's one way you can go through and see where it's positioned at. Now once we have this set over the course of 1 second, we are going to make this come down to a position. So let's go ahead and move to that 11-second mark. And what's going to happen is we want this to come down on that lower portion. So in this case, let's go ahead and set a position of 377 and 663, which is going to bring it down here. And then we want to change that scale as well from that 25 up to 85%. So you're going to see something about like this. And as we work, the nice thing is we can continue to adjust or move things. So right now it comes down into this location. So if we go through and we play it, what happens? Well, you're going to see it just simply comes in that linear fashion. That's because all it's simply saying is you got to get from point A to point B, and the fastest way from point A to point B is straight line. So that's what it's going off of. It's just moving it there because it doesn't think you want to go anywhere else. But we want to go in and add some intermediate positions. So with that, we can go back here to the 10-15 mark, and we can go ahead and we can adjust the positioning on this. So they have set values for it. You can actually just move it. If I don't have a set thing and I come up here to this point and I grab a hold of this, look what happens. It starts to create a curve, so it's going to move through that. But for them, they want us to go in here at a 139 and 633. So you're going to see how it's bringing itself down to that point. And then because I had already put that other one in there, this is going to make a little bit of a different swoop because of the fact that it created that little Bezier curve coming off of that one based on the fact that I made that little move. But we're going to go ahead and just put this at 675 and 633. So there it goes through. See, it's coming down, swipes over, and then kind of swipes its way back as it goes in there and gets larger. So now you can see what it's doing. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this to come in there. It's going to come across that text. So I can already tell I'm going to have to adjust the location of my Blue Crab Charters text based upon where I currently have the logo going. Because this logo is going to come in, it's going to sweep across, and we're going to make it erase that text. So as we come in and we have that set, we now have this position. If you're happy with what you have set, you can save that. You can continue to change it, continue to move that. At any time, you can move this, and it'll write a new keyframe based on positioning. If we were to grab those handles on the corners and scale it up, it would change scale at the same time. So now we have this set inside of here. We're going to go ahead and add ourselves an animation preset to kind of work a little bit with that text that we have on there. So let's jump to the 10:10 mark. And we want to go ahead and make sure that we have our Blue Crab Charters text layer selected. And we're going to do fade out by character. So we're going to come back over to our effects and preset. And I'm just going to start working with this. We're going to see here text animate out, fade out by character. And we're just going to double click on that. Now that is going to place that effect starting at the location where I had it on there. So here we see, if we start to drag across, you're going to see that it disappears. Or at least it's starting to disappear, and then by the time we get out here, it disappears as it comes in. So we want to go ahead and we're going to set it up so that way, as that comes in, it moves across there. It's going to kind of like wipe out the text that is there. So as we go in to fade that out, we need to jump to the 10:12 mark. And we go through and we start looking at the range selector for our start keyframe. We need to adjust where that is at. So let's go into, so I'm on that first keyframe. And what we want to do is we want to move this first keyframe that is here. We want to go ahead and slide that out to 10:12. So we're just going to grab a hold of that, and I'm going to bring that out here. And this is where, as you start to work, there are going to be different ways to function. So I'm going to go ahead and take that. I want to move this over. So I want that to sit right there at the 10:12 mark is where I want this start animation to occur. So that's our starting keyframe. That's our range selector 1 set there. And then we're going to go ahead and I want to grab a hold of this one and bring this in here, the second one in here to the 10:29 mark. And that's where I want to have that set. So you can see as it goes through and you scrub across there, the text comes in. We want that to go over top so that it erases what is there. Now for me to do this, there's a couple things we could do. We already positioned an animated location or position of the logo. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move back over here, and I am simply going to go ahead and grab a hold of my text, and I'm going to move this text. So as I said, I'm a nudger, so I'm going to go ahead and nudge this to a location that I am happy with. I want it to be a little lower, but I don't want it to be so low, so that I want that to swipe across. There we go. So what's going to happen is we have that come in there. You can see him pick it up. So that's where it's what's nice is once we create something, once we apply something, we can still continue to move those individual objects around. So we can go through, we have that. I'm going to save this now because I'm happy with it. If you want to, you can go back to the home and you can watch this come in. So there's what they're doing, location. Then up comes our blue crab charters. It's going to sweep in and swipe that away. And then you should have it looking sort of like this at this point. So now I want to go in and we want to look at what else can we do as we start dealing with text. So if we come in here, we start to look at our blue charters, that's here. So there's our blue crab charters. We're going to go right around the 910 mark. That's where they're working off of. And we're going to look at the ability to go in and actually skew some letters. And what can we do with that text animator group that's available to us. So if we go ahead and we come in here to our blue crab charters and we toggle it open, what you're going to see inside of here are different settings available to us. And there's also then this ability with our text that we can go here. We can start to deal with adding in an animate property to it. So if we come in here to our animations, what is it that we're selecting? What is it that we're working with? Well, we want to go in and look at the ability to skew. So if I scroll back up, text here, we have our animate. So you see text goes over to animate, and there's up here we have this skew. Now once we go in and we choose this, what you're going to see is you're going to get this animator down here. It comes up as animator 3. Now the challenge as we add things is, yes, we chose an animate skew. A lot of people think, well, it's going to come up and it's going to call it, you know, animate skew or skew animate or something long. It doesn't. Whatever we've done to animate, it's going to come to the next number. So it goes on there. We're going to animate 1, animator 1, animator 2. Now we're on animator 3. If we have animator 3 selected, we can hit return. That's going to highlight it, going to allow us to rename it. I encourage you, as you start getting multiple things on there, start applying multiple effects to get used to starting to name things. It's a lot easier for you as you go in and begin to work. So we're going to go ahead and call this skew animator, and then we can hit return, and you'll see that it keeps the name that is on there. Down below here, we see then our selectors. So what exactly is it that we're going to select? So range selector 1, if we toggle it down, we see 0, 100%. So what is that? Well, if I go through and I start to move this, I start to work with this, what's going to happen is when I adjust it, it's going to go through and begin to work with whatever I have selected. Well, right now it's not doing anything because we have range selectors start at 0, end at 100%, offset 0. So it's not going through and doing anything right now. We have our skew is set to 0. So all we've done is we've added an animator with no animation to it. So, I mean, maybe that's what you want, just so you can say, look at all the stuff I added. But instead, we're going to go in here and we want to start to edit what's here. So the start, if you go on here, we start to drag, what you're going to see is you'll see this little marker come up, this right here. It's indicating where is the start of that animator. If we go to the end and we reduce the end down, you're going to see then that's the end. So now when we go through, we start to add it, it's only going to add the skew to the items that fall between these two markers. So what we want to do is we want to focus just on the middle word crab. So we're going to go ahead and set that so we go over to the C, and then we're going to get that so it's back on the other side of the space. You'll see here, starting here, ending here. So the only thing when we go and start to play with this is only going to be inside of this crab area. So now that we have this set, we need to go in and look at what is it that we want to go in and adjust. It's only going to impact what is between those two. So if we come down here to the skew value, if I scroll in, we're going to be able to see everything here. If I come down here to the skew value, you'll see as I move that, as we move that, you're going to see it's going to work just with those characters. And because of the way, something with the text here, it's going to adjust. So for this, if your C and your B are doing like mine are, like C and the B aren't going as far, you have those spaces on both sides. If you skip back to those spaces, you'll see you get a bit more of a consistent skew going on with them. So this allows us to go in and we can adjust what we want to do with our skew. So let's go ahead. We play with that. Let's set our skew back to 0 at the moment. And let's jump to the 9:15 mark. At the 9:15 mark, we're at 0. Now we went and set it to 0 because if we had a skew on there, we jumped to 9:15 and we turn the stopwatch on. It's going to record that position with that skew value. So let's go ahead and go to the 9:15. We're going to turn the skew on. So now the skew is set at 0. We're going to move this forward 3 frames. So with that, we're going to jump into 9:18. And let's go ahead and change that skew to 50. And you can still see what's going on up there. That's why on the zoom here, allowing us to see it all. So it bounces to the right. We're going to jump to the 9:25 mark. At 9:25, we're going to take this to a -50. So bounce back the other way. And then we're just going to go 5 more frames to 10. Oh, wait. This is set to, or 60 frames per second. So we're going to go to 10-second mark. Make sure you get enough zeros in there if you're keying it in. 10-second mark, and we're going to set that back to 0. So that allows us to go in, and if I zoom back out, we can go and see that we've adjusted our skew. Now, with that, if we look, you should see that you have keyframes about like this. Does everybody have those? Now we want to go through, we want to ease these. Now this is a situation where we've gone through and we've clicked on it, we've created all these keyframes, we're like, well, now we want to ease them. Could we go in there and select each one of these and do the keyframe assistant and say ease in, ease out, and all that other stuff, easy ease? Yes. The other thing we can also do is we can come over here to where it says skew. If you just click on the word skew, you'll see that it selects all of our keyframes for us. So now that it's gone through and selected all of our keyframes for us, now if we come down here, we could right click and we can go keyframe assistant. Just know that also up here at the top of our screen under animation, it allows us to also go into our keyframe assistant, and we can choose easy ease inside of here, and then you'll see all of those keyframes change at once. So it just speeds up the process as we go through there. So what's ultimately working is it's easing on both sides, but we haven't begun. So once it begins, it's going to ease out. It'll ease through. So it's going to slow down, hit the point, and then slowly ramp back up to move to the next one. Same thing. And of course, that last one, it's going to ease as it comes into the station that is there. Now that we have all those set, we want to make sure we come back up here to our Blue Crab charters and go ahead and close up what's there. U-key, sometimes you're going to find that when you first hit it, it may open up additional things, or it may close down and open up the basics. So you may have to hit U 3 times, but that allows us to go in there and close what is there. So now if we go back to the beginning, we can go ahead and we can play this and see what do we have at this point. Goes through, scales down, location, company, it's going to swipe in. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and bring ourselves in one more set of text to allow us to get to that end product. I do encourage you that as you're working, before you do a preview, to save it. There's a history there that you go through, you work, you build a bunch of stuff, you go to preview it, and it's crashed. I've had it happen. Had it happen many times. So with that, I do encourage you to save before you preview so that you don't lose something. You may have been moving things around, setting them up exactly the way you want them, and you preview and boom, it's gone, then you get to redo it all. So now that we have that set, we're going to go in and add in the last thing, the providing excursions daily. So let's go ahead and we're on our fish swim timeline. And let's go ahead and jump to the 11:30 mark. So that's where we've gone in and the blue crab's moved all the way around. It's come over to the left there after wiping out the name, and it's been replaced by the logo. We want to add some simple text that's coming into here. So let's go ahead and grab our horizontal type tool once again. Once we grab that, we're going to just simply come out here and we're going to go ahead and click so that we have an insertion point. Be careful as we go out and work with our text. If you end up over top of other copy, it may select that copy, which will then change what it is that you are doing and make you have to go back and fix some stuff. So with that in there, we're going to go ahead and type in providing excursions, might want an R, daily. Now if we look at our text, this is all caps, because if we look at our character panel, we see that we still have all caps on. So if I go ahead and click on that to remove it, you'll then see it goes through and adjusts itself based upon the way that I went in and typed it. So it just depends on what you want for that. In our case, we're going to keep this as all caps. And then we're going to go match up. So we use the Married Pro, so we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. Married Pro, semi-bold. They have bold, so we're going to go Married Pro bold once again. We're going to set that at 48, which is what we used last time, so it should still be there. Make sure that your fill box is set to white if it isn't already. And then actually, they want us to use small caps. So when we go through and we start to look at this, we're going to have small caps. Now this is where it's going to matter what we type in as we keystroked it. Because when we keystroke it, anything that's a capital will be full size. Anything that is in there as lowercase will be small caps. And then once you have that, we're going to come in here to our text. And we're going to go ahead and position that up so it lines up with that right side. Once again, we can toggle open our grid so that we can see our grid, and we can go ahead and nudge that over until you're happy with the look of it. That's where I'm going to place that. So we're working this off of the bottom of where the blue crab chargers is at, which is about where that first, for me, is about where that first solid line is coming in there, the heaviest line, and then to the right to match up with the text that's over on the other. So now that we have that set, this is where we want it to be at this location. So we're going to go ahead and hit P for our position. So we're at the 11:30 mark. This is where it's going to end at. So we have it set. You're happy with it. Let's go ahead and toggle on the stopwatch. That's going to write the keyframe of the end location. What you're going to find as you start to work too is you may end up going in there and building what it looks like, setting keyframes for positions of items, and then maybe you want them to disappear. So you'll move all the way back so that way when you play it the regular way, everything ends up in the right location. So in this case, we're at the 11:30 mark. We're going to jump back to the 11-second mark. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and drag this just simply off the right side of the composition. So we're going to go ahead and grab a hold of it. We're going to hold down Shift. Let's just go ahead and drag this off to the right side. So we're going to get it off the screen. There isn't anything for an exact location for it. If you're questioning as to how fast it comes in there, you can go ahead and start to look. So see there. If you decide that the first keyframe it's too far away, remember we can just move the playhead and make sure that you see the highlighted keyframe indicating that keyframe is currently active. And then we can adjust the placement of this. So if I want this just off the edge, so I can put it right on there. Then we can go ahead and we can look at what's happening with that. It comes in, boom, and then we have our text come in to it. So once you're happy with that, we can go ahead and we can save that. So if you have that saved, you can go ahead, if you want to, you can hit the home key and you can go ahead and play it. See the stuff all starting to come in. So it allows us to see what exactly is happening there. So up to this point, we have all these things here and we have these things coming in and moving. So we're going to go ahead and work on creating then a motion blur, or adding in a motion blur to objects. As objects move, they don't just, it's not a solid thing that moves. There's a motion blur that's going to be into there. It's just the way we see stuff as well. So we want to go ahead and add those in as we work with it. So on the fish swim, we're going to come in here. We want to go ahead and adjust our motion blur. So we have our text. That's how I usually come in. Look here, we know that we have all of our text layers. So let's select those because those are text layers that are inside of there. What other items are we working with? We have our Blue Crab logo. Our logo comes in. We're not doing anything else with that. We can go ahead and toggle on that one. We have this location one. Well, the thing with the location one is it has its own item here as well. So let's jump over to our location timeline first. And let's turn on motion blur inside of our location timeline, or location composition. And then we'll jump back over to our fish swim and we can go ahead and we can turn it back on inside of there. So now this allows all of those to go through and work. If I go ahead and save that, and I'm going to turn off my grid that I had on. Now if we go ahead and we take this to home, we can go ahead and we can play. We can watch all of these items come in to it. It loves me right now as it's bogged down. It's going through its rendering. This is when it's animating those items coming in and out. So there comes our location. There's our Blue Crab charters. It might slow down a little bit when this comes in. Oh, it came in good. So see, it goes right straight through it the second time because it's already gone through and rendered that out. That's where we see the green across the top. So that way we can see what is here. Now as we go through to export this or to render this out, we would need to make sure that we have the right composition selected. So our fish swim. And then with that, we need to go ahead and take our composition and we need to go ahead and add it to the render queue. This will allow us to go through and look at our settings. I know the other day when we did this, we had some issues with the settings. So the big thing on here is to get in and select what's going to work. So we're going with our best quality, full resolution. So we're okay with what's going on with that. So those are the render settings. For our output module, how are we going to output this? We still would want QuickTime. Our format options, so what are we doing for a codec? So this is a 60 frame per second setup in here. Just gonna choose something and see what we get out of here. This will be a larger file. This is an Apple ProRes setup. So we'll render out what's in there. When we start working on our projects, you can export those out as anything, because I'll take a look at what you have for your main file as well. You'll notice as it goes through the render, the same areas that we go through in preview render, you'll see it starts to slow down. The same thing's going to happen here. It's going to slow down on those same segments because now it's rendering out all of that. And then once it is done rendering it out, remember, if you want to go through and do a second rendering, you're going to have to add it to render queue again, do your settings for it, and then go through and tell it to render out the final product. When it's done, it usually dings a little bell, and you know that it is complete. So once that runs through, it's done. So what we have here is you'll see these go from being blue to just being solid, let you know what that you went through and exported out before. It does show you all the settings, so if you're wondering what worked, what didn't work, you can always come back in here and you can review those items to see what is there. So as you start to work with text, you start thinking about text, think about what ways can you go in to work and animate the text to give it a much different feeling than just being static text that is on there.